Thank you so much, Roger, for being here with us today.
Very well.
Just wanted to talk to you about your music and your activism involving Palestine, and perhaps a little bit about your tour. And I thought maybe first that we'd start off by maybe taking a look at, myself being a Canadian and perhaps yourself as someone from the UK. It'd be safe to say that we were exposed to a lot of mainstream media that wrongly frames Palestine as quote unquote the problem. And I'm just curious to know when you first began to see that in your own life.
All right, that old story. Okay, well, that old story is 2005, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I was on tour in Europe. Maybe it was a dockside. I can't remember what the tour was for. And suddenly in the middle of the tour of Europe, my agent calls me and he says, look, there's a space of 4 days here. We could stick a gig in. Okay, whatever. Hyde Park, Tel Aviv. Okay, whatever. So they put Hyde Park into my itinerary, and I immediately started getting emails. The first ones, interestingly, were from North Africa, from Moroccans and Algerians. And I'm going, well. And then I started getting some from the occupied territories, because the BDS movement had just started. Literally, that was the year. So, and I got an email from Omar Barghouti, who I've since got to know very well over the years. And I said, please don't, and explained everything. So, in fact, the show was sold out, and I cancelled that show, having heard that, Hyde Park is built on a Palestinian graves and blah, and blah. But I came to some kind of internal compromise, because I knew very little about what was going on in Palestine. And I moved the gig to a agricultural community where they grow chickpeas. It's a sort of peace village. It has two names. It's called, I think it's Wahat al-Salam in Arabic. I may be wrong. And in Hebrew, it's Neve Shalom. And it's sort of halfway between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. And what's good about it is that it's Jews and Muslims and Arabs and Druze and Christians and agnostics, and they all live together in this community growing chickpeas mainly. But all their children go to school together, and they teach kind of love and peace. So we did a gig there. We had 60,000 people came. I think at the time it was the biggest gig there'd ever been in Israel. And it was a huge success, and they were all Pink Floyd, blah, 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 until the very end. When I got up on my hind legs, and I said, now then, you are the generation of young Israelis who must make peace with your neighbors and blah, blah, blah. And they went from, it was uncanny. They went from that to, what the talking about? We're not going to make peace with anybody. Are you crazy? They're animals. And that, I mean, they didn't say all of that, but they went very, very quiet. Anyway, we left, and I went back the next year and went on an extended tour with a lovely lady called Allegra Pacheo, I think it's her name. And we went all over the West Bank, and it was chilling beyond anything that I could ever have imagined to see back then in 2006 what was going on. And the absolute disdain and disgust with which me with the British passport in a UNRWA vehicle was treated by all the young Israeli border guards and people. I remember thinking at the time, if they're like that to me, what must they be like to the Palestinians? And of course we know. And now, to bring it entirely up to date, we know exactly what they're like to the Palestinians, because they are, as we speak, committing genocide in Gaza.
I mean, you've seen so much in the time that you've been involved in Palestinian solidarity work, from the time that you became more proactive in the BDS movement.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering how specifically the events that have transpired since October 7th have affected you, and how maybe that's...
Well, like anybody with a heart,
Right.
I spend my life teetering on the verge of tears.
Yes.
Wilderness. Because you can't possibly put yourself in that position, in their position, those mothers and fathers, those children, those 2.3 million, well, a bit less now, people living in Gaza, being bombarded by F-16s day and night, week after week after week. One cannot even begin to imagine what it must be like. And that it's being cheered on by the most powerful empire in the world is disgusting beyond all belief. And not to mention B'nai B'rith in your country. And Trudeau, he's cheering it all on as well. What is wrong with these people? How can they possibly be doing that? How can they still be trying to cast the Israelis as victims? I'm sorry, my voice was beginning to rise then, because it's so insane what they're doing. And what the Israelis are doing is just, it's beyond all imagination. It's beyond our capacity to imagine such evil.
It's a perfect segue, because I wanted to ask you, I mean, more generally, do you think that this says something about the dark side of humanity, the evil that people are still capable of?
Yeah, well, now we're getting philosophical. And now we have to bring Yahweh into it. God has to enter the conversation at some point, because if you look at it very specifically in terms of what's going on there, God is evoked constantly. My father, I have to say, was a deeply avowed Christian. That's why my father was a pacifist, and why he was a conscientious objector. When he was called up in 1939, he said, no, I can't. I'm a Christian. I can't kill anyone. Okay, so they said, well, actually, they said to him, will you drive an ambulance in London? He said, yes, I will. And he went and drove an ambulance from the beginning of the war until 1941, when, having become politicized to some considerable extent, he had joined the Communist Party. He decided that the need to fight the Nazis trumped his Christianity. So he went back to the conscription board and said, excuse me, I've changed my mind. Oh, who are you? Waters here. Well, look, this chap's got a degree, officer material. And that was the end of it. So, he did his basic training and then officer training. And then he went to North Africa or to Italy, and he was killed.
Yes. I wanted to actually ask about your beloved father, because I know that he's, Eric Waters was commemorated in Italy decades later after World War II. And I know that you have a memory of him from the time you were around 5 months, if I'm correct. So I'm wondering if that figures in somehow into your activism today.
Yeah. I mean, interestingly enough, I do a song every night that talks about my elder brother, John, who was 2 years older than me, and how he used to sit on my father's knee when my father was home on leave, when he was doing his training, basic training and officer training and stuff like that. That's in the show every night. So you get a picture of my family, and with my big brother, me, my mother, and my father. And we see that, and I say at the end of the song, I was mercifully spared the memories that they shared. That's my father and my big brother, because I was only 5 months old when Daddy died. So I have no actual memory of my father. But I can't tell you the story about the death of my father on February the 18th, 1944, without my heart and soul going back to Gaza. Now, I mean, that's how much it affects my life now. And everybody almost that I speak to, it's so unspeakable what the Israelis are doing in Gaza that I feel my whole body revolting against it with every breath that I take. But I'm happy to, talk about the past as well.
To your credit, you're so tenacious despite all the pushback from some of these groups, as the one you mentioned in Canada.
But now I breath, my friends.
And so I'm wondering, really, like, where do you think that stems from? Where do you draw your strength from, despite this constant pushback that seems to be coming from all directions?
My mother. My father was dead. My mother wasn't. And there's this story I tell, which is true. I'll tell it very quickly. When I was about 13, I was struggling with something. I've no idea what it was, some question was. And my mother could see I was, and she's looking over and she goes, "What is it?" "Oh, Mum, nothing. I'm just..." She said, "Listen, come here. I'm going to give you some advice. All through your life, Roger, you're going to come up against knotty problems, things that you have to think through and work out and decide what to do about, make decisions. Here's my advice. When that happens to you, read, and then read some more. Find out everything that there is to know about whatever it is that is troubling you. Study the history, and don't just read the opinions of people who agree with you on it. Read everything. Find out from all sides of it. When you've done that, the hard work is over." "What do you mean?" Well, you've done all the heavy lift. "Well, what do I do then, Mum?" And she said, "You do the right thing." Mum, thanks. What an incredible lesson to give an adolescent. If only that's what we were teaching our children, instead of teaching our children, as they do in Israel, that Palestinians are animals, that they're subhuman, listening to Eilert Shekhar, we must kill all the little snakes. And if there's a pregnant woman with a little snake in her belly, kill her. What? This is what you're teaching your children? No. Eilert Shekhar, take a leaf out of my mother's book. Teach your children to do the right thing.
It's such an important point, Roger, because I do wonder whether people are losing that sensibility sometimes. There's so many distractions. We're constantly being pushed to buy, to self-present in new ways. And I wonder whether people are losing sight of just that, of doing the right thing, despite...
Yeah, many people. They are subject to propaganda, and as you mentioned the mainstream media earlier, the propaganda of the mainstream media, whose job it has become to echo what's bouncing around the echo chamber of the powers that be, the ruling class. And that's what they do. And people, it's very difficult not to be affected by that and not to take some of it in. But it is extremely dangerous because it is propaganda. And we all know how this all got developed in the last 150 years or so, with people realizing that if you hold the key to the dissemination of information, i.e. the media, well, then you have all the power, goes back to Voltaire, to the Enlightenment. Wise men have been writing about this now for like several hundred years, but it's hard for the wise things to get through to us ordinary mortals. Why is it hard? Because we live in a world where, the United States, where I live, that is a world where there's only one thing. There's only one real God that we bow down to, and that is profit. So neoliberal capitalism with profit on the altar is the thing that we all have to... Well, when you do that, you're screwed. There's no possible way that you can find your way out of the maze of that Friedman economic policy nonsense to enlightenment, or to finding the love that you might have in your heart and empathy for your brothers and sisters all over the world, irrespective of their ethnicity or religion or nationality, to find your way onto that path is almost impossible.
I feel that we're hardwired to do the right thing, but under these conditions of neoliberal capitalism, that it's almost conditioned out of us.
Yeah, we have there is still hidden within most of us an absolute instinct when you see the old lady fall down in the street to go and help her. But in terms of the way our governments work and empire works, it's wiped out, it's erased. How is it erased? By propaganda to teach us that the old lady in the street is actually vermin and needs to be eradicated. Ooh, I thought it was like somebody's grandmother. Oh, it's vermin. Okay, well, in that case, I don't want to see it, or I do want to see it. I want to sit in a deck chair and applaud while they go on dropping bombs on Gaza.
You know, I'm wondering if part of the reason in your shows you have these large visual signs, it's just a curiosity I have, is because it's telling the audience, you need to think about this. It's the important thing right now that we should be all considering as human beings, whether we like it or not. And it flies in the face of, I think, Western culture's celebration of the individual. I'll do me, don't bully me, I'll do what I want. But if, you push that to the extreme, then you have people just ignoring things all the time that they should be concerned about because it's comfortable.
Yeah, well, interesting enough, that's sort of why I made the new Redux version of Dark Side of the Moon, was because this is a piece that I wrote 50 years ago, and I could see that the business end of my music business were going to celebrate the fact that that piece of work is 50 years old. And I realized that people didn't really understand what I was writing about when I wrote it. And so that's why I've made a new version that's more reflective and that's more, as my daughter pointed out to me, she said, "This is great, Dad, because this is the 29-year-old you who wrote all this, and the 80-year-old, 79 as I was 10-year-old, looking backwards and forwards across 50 years at this piece of work and reflecting upon it from the age of 79 at the work of the 29-year-old who was like wide-eyed and, this can't be right, all that you touch and all that you see is all your life will ever be. This is it. You only get, and that is a central point of Dark Side of the Moon, is that you only get one go, as far as we know.
So, no, I'm just being single, but I'm just wondering if there's any final observations or thoughts you'd like to share before we wrap up.
My heart and my brain are so full of all the political as well as the humanitarian machinations of the Gaza question and the Palestine question right now that I find it difficult to escape from it. And all the bullshit that I'm experiencing in South America with them they just tried to cancel my show tomorrow here in Santiago in Chile, where I know I'm enormously popular, not just because the shows are sold out, they were in Buenos Aires as well. And yet the Israeli lobby still tried to get my shows in Buenos Aires cancelled on the grounds that I'm an anti-Semite, which I'm not, obviously.
Right.
It's such arrant nonsense, and yet they make up stories and then amplify them and then print them again and again and again and again and again and again. And I know we're not allowed to say it, but it's right out of Goebbels' playbook and Goering. This is exactly what they said and what they absolutely did. They said, we have to lie and lie and lie, and the bigger the lie, the more likely people are to believe. That's what these stupid arseholes have been doing against me. your friends, I know they're not, and mine in Nye Brith, these are very, very dim people. And they are completely attached to the idea of the illegal settler colonialism of the Zionist movement in Palestine. And the other crazy people who've attached themselves to this are Christian evangelicals in the United States who support Israel like Biden. And why? Because they want to see the Jews all burn in hell when Jesus comes down in the second coming. And they all go to heaven holding hands with Jesus. And they believe this bullshit. And they're prepared to sacrifice this entire beautiful planet that we live on and that is they're sacrificing the whole thing. I mean, if they should believe what they want, but they should not hold positions of political power because this is crazy.
I would love to keep going and going, but I think...
I have a gig to do.
Oh yeah, no. And if I had time, I keep going myself. But thank you so much.
Not at all. Thank you very much for talking to me.